You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 77 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me is writer, blogger, TV personality, podcast queen, and dog mom, Jessica Szilagyi.
Dog mom, always most important job.
Absolutely. The dog's more important than you are, or more famous than you are anyway.
True, and they are always like cheerful and aren't corrupt, and they eat trash and books, but I'd rather clean up trash and books than government. So.
What do they say? If you think your spouse loves you more, take your spouse and your dog, lock them both in a trunk for 30 minutes, and open the trunk and see who's happy to see you.
Right.
How was your week?
It's been very busy, but good. How's your week been?
So, I discovered today why my upper back's been hurting. It's because I'm wearing reading glasses now, and I'm constantly looking over my reading glasses to see what's on TV. And I normally have really good posture. I'm a straight up and down person. And I've been lowering my chin to my chest to look over my eyeglasses to see what's going on in front of me.
That makes me want to see a chiropractor just talking about it.
And I did. I've got a friend who's a chiropractor, and he laid on to me today and cracked it up for me. He got it moving again. But yeah, old man, self-inflicted injuries.
That's funny. It's tough getting old.
It's not for the faint of heart, but it beats the alternative.
That's right.
That's all right. I mean, you had a birthday not long ago. You're catching up.
I did. It was like the first time ever where I'm not like the kind of person that has a blowout for every birthday or anything, but 31 was just very bleh. Like, I didn't mind working. I didn't really I could have cared less if anything or anyone recognized it. I was just like, let's just keep moving. Or not, let's go in reverse. Almost
like you're an adult.
I know. It's terrible.
Man, yeah. It doesn't really remark for me. I take it as an excuse to go fishing. But other than that, I don't really care about my birthday. Other than getting a Publix cake.
I'm glad you brought that up. I went to dinner on my birthday and didn't want restaurant dessert, so I was like, let's stop at Publix. And I got a piece of cake, and it was terrible. And it was the first time in my life that the Publix cake was terrible.
Wow.
But I'm wondering if it was because I got a slice and not a cake, and, sometimes, I don't know, maybe it was a day too long. I don't know. But I was disappointed because Publix cake is one of life's constants. You could be going through a breakup, you could be losing your job, maybe you could be in a recession, but Publix cake is still the same.
Yeah, that's shocking.
I know. So, I'm not giving up, but...
Well, we do need to remark on the shootings that happened now a little over a week ago in Santa Fe and in Ohio. We're not going to mention the shooters' names here. There's no reason, not that they're one sitting in hell and one is sitting in a jail cell listening to the show, but just as a matter of practice, not to glorify what they did. I don't want to say more concerning. I guess it is when it deals with everybody's rights. I've said many times that the most dangerous thing is to have a mass shooting while a Republican is the president when it comes to Second Amendment rights.
I agree with you from a policy perspective. I am so tired of the conversation coming up so quickly after something happens. I'm so tired of it becoming a political pinball within minutes and hours of finding out that something happened. you know, both sides of the aisle criticized and look back and criticize what happened after 9/11 and the Patriot Act and the way that we changed security and surveillance. And people look at, I mean, anytime there's something, we reevaluate so quickly. But with this, it's just a constant political battle that will never be won.
And I think 9/11 is an interesting example because we were all outraged, we were all angry, but there was no jump to do anything. And, you know, people forget, because time condenses on us, that we didn't go running to Afghanistan on September 12th. It took time to gather intelligence, find out what happened, make a proper assessment, and then plan an attack, so to speak. Well, not so to speak, quite literally an attack. And like or dislike the policies that came out of it, they weren't blaming politics as it was happening. I mean, they will jump to conclusions as the shooting is happening, as the scene is hot. I think that's a very good point. There's no appetite to take a breath. Let's see what happened. Or
to mourn. I mean, I can't imagine. I guess, no, I've never had someone close to me die in a massacre or a mass shooting or any type of publicized tragedy. So I can't say that I've walked in those shoes. But, you know, there's a difference between advocating for reform, either from a societal perspective or from a policy perspective, in the name of somebody. I think it's unfortunate when those names get used as pawns or ways to make a point. And I mean,
well, and I'll tell you, the interesting thing to me from a media perspective is they said the guy in Texas was a Trump supporter, so that was Trump's fault. And the guy in Ohio was a Liz Warren supporter, and that's Trump's fault. And in this hyper-political environment we're in, especially coming into a presidential campaign, is they want to make political points standing on a pile of dead bodies.
And that, to me, I feel like that's a disservice to the families and the victim. Like, dying in whatever circumstances in, you know, El Paso or in Ohio, that's not the most, dying that way is not the most important thing that person did in their life, or, you know, however you want to phrase that. But that's not the most important thing. That's not the most interesting thing about them. It's a tragedy. And you distract from everything else they've ever done in their life. You distract from the memories their family wants to have, because suddenly their face is being used to make a point.
Right. Oh, it's repugnant. Absolutely, it's repugnant at this point. It's just in the knee-jerk reactions. Last week, we already had Lindsey Graham say they've got a bipartisan agreement on red flag legislation. And the way it was put, and I'm going to put air quotes, it encourages states to pass red flag legislation by giving grants to those that do. And real quick, Jessica, do you want to tell us what red flag legislation is? Okay, I will. I was just going to throw it to you because I've been talking too much. Okay. Red flag legislation, and we won't know exactly what it looks like until it comes out of the sausage grinder.
Yes, that makes me feel a little bit better, because I was like, did something come out that I don't know about? I mean, I understand the concept, but I was like,
right, yeah, that's what's getting at. The concept is you find somebody who, I put quotes again, obviously mentally imbalanced. They can go in and seize the firearms of that person and then have him come in. And we've talked about red flag laws on the show before. And then he has to go and prove to the court essentially that he's not nuts.
Even though he may not be, or in most situations, there's no crime. There's no suspected crime.
Right. It's Minority Report. Absolutely. We're going to go ahead and take the firearms away from them.
Right.
And Trump went as far as to say that he wants to employ social media to help sniff these folks out. That would put Mark Zuckerberg in charge of your Second Amendment rights.
Well, yeah, and between fake profiles and fake accounts, that could be a nightmare.
And like I've said before, difference between a dog and a cat. Tell a dog not to do something and you yell at him, he learns, oh man, I'm not going to do that anymore. You do that to a cat, the cat does, I'm going to do it quieter and faster. All these people are going to do is go to the dark web or just not say anything. Is if they're planning something is not give any intelligence, not tip their hat. It also is a huge burden on the mental health profession. Because the words that Trump keeps using are mentally ill. Well, mentally ill can be OCD. Mm-hmm. It can be
an eating disorder.
Sex addiction, any other thing that you can operate in normal society that doesn't make you dangerous. And I've actually seen plenty of mental health professionals come out and say the verbiage that he's using is dangerous to our work because it keeps good people from seeking help. He also expressed a desire to lock these folks up, to snatch them off the street and lock them into a mental institution. And as much as we've talked about mental health before, about wanting to change some of the commitment standards, man, snatching people off the streets and throwing them into one flew of the cuckoo's nest is not what I would consider a small government ideal.
This has been in the forefront. I think Colorado was the one that was really harping on it, and we had a very unique and short-lived version like this in Georgia that just this past legislative session, which I think is one of the references when you said we talked about it earlier. But I think it's one of the most alarming. I don't like any gun restrictions, but this is the most alarming to me because if you look at the way, like civil asset forfeiture and how that comes without a crime and it comes based on information that the government provides, the people who stand to benefit, like the only person who stands to benefit or the only entity that stands to benefit from an unarmed person is the government. And the government is going to decide if you can't have your guns. And we see how civil asset forfeiture is abused, how it was created to, stop sex trafficking rings and drug smuggling and these big things. And now we see it with people who have a broken headlight or they were speeding or, they have a code violation and they got pulled over. Just something petty. That's how it always starts like that and ends up way down the road. And
Well, the other thing they're talking is universal background checks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If I sell, say Georgia, if I sell you a gun, you give me cash, I give you the gun. If you go to a gun store, you have to do a background check or you have to have your weapons license. Same thing at a gun show. There's no gun show loophole. You buy from a gun show, you're buying from a licensed dealer, you still have to do all the same paperwork. Universal background checks would take anybody's gun collection and make it worth about half. Because once you make background checks mandatory, the cost of those checks are going to be $100, $200, $300. Because the dealers will be able to charge whatever they want because you have no legal way of selling it. Away from the financial is we shouldn't be treating guns any different than we treat a hammer. Mm-hmm. It's a tool. And I know nobody on this podcast, listening to this podcast would be shocked by my opinion that it's a tool. It's an inanimate object. It's not evil. It's not good. It is as useful as the person holding it. Trump did say last week that there's no appetite in Congress for a new assault weapons ban or a magazine ban.
I don't believe that.
Well, all these guys have to run for office too.
I feel like right now, and maybe it's just because it's been a while since the last time that, I mean, not a while, but it's been some time, and we've talked about so many other things, and we talk about things off this podcast that I forget about, but in the last week, I have seen so many opinion pieces where the person is advocating for a full repeal of the Second Amendment, and I don't recall it being so prevalent. And the calls, I mean, it's not just, like, I don't feel like we're arguing just for assault weapon protections, so to speak.
And I believe that, again, the hyper-political is because we're coming into an election season, and because many of the opinion pieces are leaning to the left, that they think they can hang Trump on this, saying we should repeal the Second Amendment and push. This is their opportunity to get people to go against anybody who's endorsed by the NRA, which is not my favorite organization in the world. It's got to be hyper political. They're trying to strike while the iron's hot. That'd be the only reason someone would want to repeal the Second Amendment, is they want it now. It's not a reaction to these shootings. They don't want to repeal automobiles. Your odds of being killed in a mass shooting are much lower than being killed by a shark. You know, you hate to take things down to a straight actuary, but your odds are very, 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 very low of gun violence. In fact, half of gun deaths are self-inflicted. They're suicides.
Right.
And
people don't want to admit that.
Right, and somehow suicides get lumped in with gun violence because that's what they want to do to bolster their numbers. But we could do an entire show on it, and we almost have. A quick recap from an earlier show: Puerto Rico. As of last week, when we recorded, is in a constitutional crisis. Rosselló appointed a Secretary of State, Pedro Pierluisi, and he then resigned. Rosselló resigned, and Pedro becomes governor. Well, he was never confirmed by the Senate. There was a 2005, I believe, law that says that if he assumes the governor's office, he doesn't have to be confirmed by the Senate. Well, the Senate filed suit with the state or the territory Supreme Court to have him removed, and a day after he was sworn in, the Supreme Court agreed, including several members of his own party, and had him removed, leaving the unpopular Vasquez that we talked about a week or two ago, who didn't want it. She was essentially the Attorney General, whatever their line is for it. She didn't want it. She knew the protesters didn't want it, but she got it. And there's already a hashtag Wanda Renuncia or Wanda Resign trending on social media even before Rosselló formally vacated the position.
It just must be insane down there right now. I wish people cared about our government as much as the people down there care about what's going on.
But they didn't. That's why they got the government they have.
You think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
sometimes I wonder if it's just inevitable that we would have it no matter what.
But it's a mess down there. I mean, for the average person, the governor doesn't have any say over their day-to-day life. What got Rosselló, like we talked about, is the tweets, or not the tweets, but the messages back and forth, making fun of Ricky Martin, whatever else, is what really got the protest going. But she, being tied to that administration, didn't even want it. So, and I don't know if this will happen before the show airs, But there was a theory that she would appoint a new Secretary of State, get it confirmed by the Senate, and go ahead and step down. She never wanted to be governor. It should be noted that Pierre Lucie was appointed Secretary of State during a recess. It was a recess appointment.
Yeah, that's what I really want to harp on, because I feel like I don't know if you knew this when we talked about Puerto Rico on the show, but I just thought this was totally shady. Because he was only confirmed by the House, and he's supposed to be confirmed by both chambers, and then right after he's confirmed by the House, the other governor steps down.
Right.
That just reeks of, like, if I were the people, I would be upset right now because what has been destroyed in the period where he did have office, it was in office.
Right. Well, what was he appointing? A yes man? Was he appointing somebody who would cover his tracks for him? That would be my first concern, is the total lack of any sort of confirmation or election by anybody. He's going to be, whoever takes it over is going to be an appointed, including Vasquez is an appointed governor.
That's frightening to me anyway. I mean, like, well, I don't like Jeff Duncan, but at least the people elected him if something happens to Brian Kemp.
Right. And there's an order of succession with an election that the closest I can even put it to would be Ford. And taking over the vice presidency after Spiro Agnew. Mm-hmm.
I hope that, I understand that some people don't want her to serve, but I hope it settles down a little bit, because it's not good for, it's not good for it to be in that constant state of turmoil. It's going to get bad, worse, violent.
And how many millions will go missing during that time?
Right.
When there are no checks and balances, no one knows who's in charge of these departments because everybody's resigned. So you don't know who's in charge, nobody's responsible, and the voters have had no say at this point in who's leading the country, or leading the territory. One would argue we don't have much control over who's leading the country either. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you think it will be, I know that there's a split on the Secretary of Justice, but you think it will be a peaceful transition?
I think so. I don't see blood. There may be some more protests, but I don't see, this is my prediction, this is me staring into the crystal ball. I don't see the level of riots over her holding the seat, having not been involved in those text messages versus Rosselló. So I don't see the violence. Are you going to see some protests? Probably. And you may see some stuff online. I don't think you're going to see revolution or anything like that going on. I think you're going to see some folks pitch a fit, and she may resign. Like I said, she doesn't want it. She's already said she doesn't want it. And she's duty bound to this. Yeah, she's duty bound to take it at this point because there's nobody else to do it. And a reluctant servant is the best. You're right.
Yeah. The people who hate being elected are the best. Not hate from like they're just bitter all the time, but when they're suffering a little, when they don't enjoy it all that much, when there's a lot about it that they don't like, they're usually the good ones.
Duty-bound servants.
Mm-hmm.
The absolutely. I don't know that we've seen one in these parts lately.
No.
that is the problem with our election style, and I don't think it's going to change, but the folks that want to run for election do have a bit of an ego, and they do want to be liked. And it's less of a duty to serve my community and more of a let me advance my career.
Right.
So I know it's awful. I don't
Very
know.
optimistic.
I know, man. I know. Bummer starting off the show. They're going to take away your guns and your elections mean nothing.
Yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed the last 25 minutes. As a reminder, these are our opinions, not those of All on Georgia.
Oh, All on Georgia agrees.
I mean, All on Georgia knows what's up, but they're still our opinions.
They know what's up, huh? all of a sudden, you're from the streets.
Yes.
So, felony charges in a mid-air profanity-laced rant. A 29-year-old Denton man flirted with a woman next to him, touching and playing footsies. Nothing I thought I would say on this show. Mm-hmm. With her, according to an FBI complaint. When she rebuffed his... Oh, please go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I'll wait.
When she rebuffed his advances and requested a new seat, flight attendants scolded him. He then threw a profanity-laced tantrum in the flight attendant's face for about 30 seconds and then sat down and kept quiet for the duration of the flight, according to court records.
They had to divert the plane. I don't know how long it took them to land. I don't know if it was like 20 minutes or an hour or what, but they diverted the plane, and when he got off, the FBI is waiting for him. And he didn't even get in trouble for what happened with the woman. Like, and not that what she said he was doing or whatever. We don't know the facts around that. But should yelling at a flight attendant I would be so ticked if I was on that flight and you diverted my flight and made me late for a connecting flight or late wherever I was going simply because somebody cussed you out for 30 seconds.
Right.
Especially when he sat back down. I mean, that's my thing. He sat back down.
He did sit back down. The full story going back and forth, and of course we don't know. None of us were there. One, the flight attendant was bigger than he was. It was a ball-bearing attendant. The woman said that he sat down. Of course, he's not being charged with this part of this. Is what amazes me. This is the creepy. This is that creeps me out about it. Is sat down, started talking to her. Which, number one, on a flight, leave me alone. I have noise canceling headphones for a reason. I don't want to talk other than excuse me. I need to get to the aisle. Mm-hmm. Started talking to her, touch her arm. Propositioned her, asked her if she was staying alone in her hotel room, rested his head on her shoulder, and then started playing with her feet. Anyway.
But 20 years in prison is what he faces for his belligerence for 30 seconds. Like, in my opinion, I don't know that I necessarily agree when we don't really know what happened with the woman, but wouldn't touching a passenger be like a more worthy reason to land the plane than cussing?
Well, and they separated the two of them. And apparently he got up and walked back to the seat that she took. And the flight attendant told him that he needed to return to his seat. And that's when it all started. I think the quote is, "Leave me the F alone." He then addressed the other passenger saying, "As a matter of fact, you all you guys leave me the F alone."
I understand you have to have order on an airplane. I mean, for a number of reasons. You don't want people to panic. You don't want to fight. You don't want a physical altercation. I get it. But I don't know. I'm not on board with this one.
Well, look, here's the thing. Being an asshole.
Shouldn't get you 20 years in prison.
Right. Now,
get him kicked off the flights indefinitely. He can't fly with them again. Why is the FBI waiting to take you away facing 20 years in prison?
And of course, I don't know if we've mentioned what airline this is. Survey says Southwest. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. You usually don't see these on the flights that I take. Out comes the snob.
Oh. He's like, because I fly private.
Not quite. I do fly Delta.
You poor thing.
Wow. Then Sky Miles. Everything he did was creepy as hell. And look, it was all worthy of when they land, have the police there to meet the plane at the destination. If he doesn't do anything else, don't divert the plane. Don't ruin everybody else's day. Not that anybody on Southwest has a job. Have the police meet him there, interview the woman, see if she wants to press charges, or if she just wants to let it go. But make sure that he knows this is unacceptable. Kick him off of Southwest for life. Whatever else you want to do, you're right. But as far as interfering with the flight crew, man.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
Right. Calling a flight attendant an asshole does not interfere with his duties.
When his attorney is saying they're challenging the federal law, saying it's vague and unconstitutional, and the feds say that it properly criminalizes speech or conduct on board an aircraft during flight, like you said. But the whole reason that this is an issue is because you are criminalizing something that occurs on a private. It's also intertwined between the FAA and rules and regulations, coupled with all the laws and everything. It makes it a bigger mess. But why are you let the company decide what they want to do?
Right. He didn't jump up and say, I'm going to blow this thing up. He didn't jump up and say, I'm going to kill everybody in here. He said, leave me the F alone.
There's no victim.
Right. Well, other than that poor girl.
Well, sure, but they're not sticking up for her.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely right. There's an actual victim and the government's ignoring that. And they're going to go with the flight attendant felt intimidated. Therefore, we had to divert the flight and screw up everybody else's schedule.
The bigger flight attendant who could have probably knocked him flat.
I don't know. I mean, learning on the prison yard. Now, once again, we always defend the worst of humanity. He had just made parole in California. Admitted to using meth the day before, or 2 days before, and heroin before that. And he was on his way to live with a family member who was going to be responsible for him and his parole.
He didn't quite make it.
You can't, man. He's probably happy. He's like, I'm going to go to a federal prison where it's nice and clean and safe. It's going to be great.
I might be there a little longer because there's no parole, but, conditions are better.
They are. The quote that I love is that it said that he may have misread the situation when he thought they were flirting and put his hand on her leg.
Okay.
Again, and this is one of those things where you should get the snot kicked out of you. Like, there should have been 3 dudes that met him off the plane and stomped him into next week. That's not the way you treat somebody. That's not the way you treat a woman you just met. You don't lay hands on a stranger. But 20 years in federal prison, we're going to pay for him to sit in prison for 20 years. We're paying for him to sit in jail now because bail was denied. Almost like a subject we've talked about before. They're calling him a flight risk because he doesn't live in, was it New Mexico where they landed? Mm-hmm. He's had a unstable home life and became involved with drugs and alcohol. The government opposes his release, citing what a prosecutor called his lengthy criminal history.
For cussing someone out.
For cussing, right.
On an airplane. And I'm all for, like you said, get on the plane, sit down, and shut up. But I'm also not willing to send someone to prison because they didn't get on the plane, sit down, and shut up.
And were there no dudes on this flight? I mean, I understand there were probably people with male genitalia. Were there no dudes on this flight that would stand up, punch the guy in the face, tell him to sit down?
Guess not.
I mean, obviously the flight attendant has to balance his job with the level of violence he has to put into it. But a private citizen, I mean...
Good thing they didn't. They'd be in freaking prison.
I don't know if they would or not. No, they'd probably be fine. I mean, yeah, I'd be fine doing it. Got a clean rap sheet. They can't hold me. I've never been involved with drugs and alcohol. Well, not drugs. But yeah, as their reason to withhold bail as his unstable home life and his history of drugs and alcohol. Having not been convicted of anything and charged with something that's questionably a crime. I know, more than questionably in your book. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, the government wants to punish him for deviating from the socially acceptable norms of airline travel.
Hell no.
First of all, it's a bit of a stretch.
Well, it's also a terrible reason to do anything government.
Oh, no, I agree. But yeah, the norms of airline travel used to be a tie. And it used to be cordial. They also didn't used to strip you naked going through security. But that's, yeah, with the federal crime part, no. If they want to charge him with accosting a woman, that's arguable. Especially considering she had, perceivably, when you take your seat on a flight, you don't have anywhere to go. You don't have any escape. So if they want to charge him with something like that, and again, if you want three big dudes to beat the snot out of them when they land in Dallas, wherever they're going, fine. But 20 years seems a bit strong for saying, leave me the F alone. Which is something I say around here about 4 times a week. I'm just kidding. I'd get the snot kicked out of me for saying that. So, state is suing landlord on behalf of tenants after media investigation.
Oh man, this one's got me feeling all kinds of things.
Guess you're feeling all sorts of things?
Mm-hmm. This is in Arkansas.
Yes, it is in Pulaski County, Arkansas.
So, this landlord, he's a big landlord, owns 150 properties. And in this lawsuit, which is, like Dave said, filed by the state, they say that he has a habit of renting out homes with code violations and to the ones with the low income. So, I'm going to give you some examples before we go into it, because I believe that the code, it's just a really interesting thing, because the code violations seem totally legit. They're talking about, a stove caught on fire the first time a man used it. There was a hole under the kitchen sink where a possum had taken up a residence. A bathtub wasn't properly sealed. Cabinets were water damaged, caving in. Carpets were infested with mold. Holes in the ceiling. Some of them didn't have air conditioning, or they would have makeshift heaters and things like that. Things that, whether you see as the proper role of government or not, there are code violations and standards, and these were repeatedly not being met by this landlord. And they said that the city had cited him, the landlord, 170 times for different properties in Little Rock and North Little Rock since January 2016. And I guess all of this came out through a media investigation, which I love, but that's what prompted the Attorney General to kind of step in. Now, I think it's wrong that this, if you have a Deceptive Trade Practice Act and this man is violating it, I can appreciate that they want to step in. But the lawsuit is seeking an injunction, an order imposing civil penalties restitution for the renters, and the suspension of forfeiture of franchises, corporate charters, licenses, permits, and other things that allow him to do business in Arkansas. So
it's also worth noting that he is a business owner in Arkansas, and some of the properties are owned by his business.
Right.
So he owns a medical type business. His name is Imran Bora, and he owns about 150 rental properties through both his corporation, which he should have formed its own corporation for liability purposes for the rental properties. Remember that, kids. If you're gonna be a slumlord, get an LLC.
Yeah, do it right. And make it good for taxes. But okay, so and going back to the code violations, I guess the way in addition to the code violations, he was also or has been evicting tenants that complain about the conditions, which I don't know if you remember, but just this year in Georgia, we passed the bill that says they can't retaliate for up to a year for things like this. I'm guessing this is the type of thing that was happening. I don't know. I still don't like the bill, even knowing this story. But he was filing unlawful evictions. I think he evicted 95 people since July 2017. He had an unlawful detainer.
Okay. On the law in Georgia, it was already illegal to retaliate. Yeah, it was already, if you're already in a lease, it was already illegal to retaliate. You couldn't just violate the lease and kick somebody out anyway. Our law oversteps that by saying that if you complain about the conditions, you get extra time to without being evicted, not paying rent. So
true, but you can also sue for damages in the Georgia law.
Yeah, and that's fine. As far as suing for damages and that kind of stuff, that's civil.
I don't know, though, because, yes, we're talking about an egregious... This landlord has a series... what he was doing, he was lying about people failing to pay their rent or starting the eviction process, days before, and it hurt their credit and it kept them from renting other places. But not all of the complaints... the reason that law is troublesome is because it doesn't actually prevent people like this. These people weren't not paying their rent because the stove didn't work or the AC didn't work. And, he evicted them for complaining. But what we tried to do here, or what we did do here in Georgia, would not capture these people. Because this guy's going to file bankruptcy and dissolve that company so that the liability just goes away.
Absolutely. And the thing is, the renters, the low-income renters, will have nowhere to go.
That's right. And so here's my problem. I'm struggling, and maybe you have a good reason for it that maybe might open my mind, but I'm not a fan of the state suing on behalf of these people for the restitution. And I understand it's as part of the act of the... deceptive trade practices. I get that. But suing for an injunction, imposing the civil penalties for the violation, that's fine. And I understand these are low-income people, but do we create laws so that the state can represent low-income people who have been wronged through a private contract? A lot of these, not saying it's right, but a lot of these people said they saw the conditions of the apartment or wherever they were moving in, and they were told it was going to be fixed before they moved in, and then it wasn't. Well, a little bit of that comes on you.
Caveat emptor. No, you're right. The thing is some people will look at a single wide trailer with a branch growing through part of the roof, tarps over it, holes in the floor, and go, how much? $200 a month? You got it. And the state has no place getting involved in that, saying that if that's the condition that you want to live in, or that's what you can afford, it sure beats living under a bridge. If people knew that the air conditioner wasn't working, and he's like, well, here's a window unit, or what we have for heating is, a 55-gallon drum. That is, if that is the agreement that you're going to get into, either by economic standards or your personal standards. That's one thing. The issue that I have that you brought up, which is using the state attorney general's office to sue a private individual on behalf of a class, is it's not his place. His place is to, what did we say last week, a week before? The attorney general does not represent the people of the state. Right. It represents the state. So if they want to get in on a lawsuit, they can go and get a class action lawsuit, or they can go and get get an attorney on contingency. So the attorney gets paid if they win, and he takes a percentage, or whatever. Or
you could sue the county, like the AG could sue the county for not enforcing the state law.
Oh, sure, absolutely. But as far as the individual goes, is they can either sue pro se, or they can get an attorney on contingency. Either way is perfectly fine, but that would be like Chris Carr suing me because my renters don't like the conditions they have.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that your government can sue you at all, but whatever. Right.
And I can, well, I don't know about Arkansas, but I can't sue the state.
Exactly.
So they can sue me on behalf of somebody who's not even involved in it. So this is a complete third party suing me for somebody else. That it's no matter how much money this guy has, he doesn't have enough money to fight the state of Arkansas. Because that attorney general literally has unlimited resources. A team of lawyers that can work around the clock to do nothing but bury him in paperwork until he is so poor with paying attorneys that he finally has to fold up and just say, okay, I did it.
I did look. Arkansas is just like Georgia when it comes to sovereign immunity. It says that the state shall not be a defendant.
Well,
per the Constitution.
Good thing I'm long-winded. You had a chance to look that up.
The state of Arkansas shall never be made a defendant in any of her courts.
So the state, just like the state of Georgia, can sue me, but I can't countersue.
Yep. The state of Arkansas can be a damn plaintiff for money, because they're going to get a cut.
Oh, of course. So they can call me all sorts of names in court, and I can't file a lawsuit against them for defamation.
You can't do anything against them.
Right. So,
except sue them procedurally to make it a federal case. Which is so ridiculous, too.
And once again, we're not defending the scumbag. It's the procedure that this is going through in order to correct it. That's the problem. We're not defending this landlord. This landlord's a scumbag, and
absolutely. These people who were wronged, legitimately wronged, because I guarantee you that not all of them were, but the legitimately wronged parties should sue, and they should win, and there should be an injunction, but I don't understand. It shouldn't. Ugh.
Well, here's the thing about this guy. This guy is the sort of scumbag that makes it tough for legitimate real estate owners to evict people who don't pay rent or damage the property or any other reason that you want to evict them for violating their lease. Is this sort of story is what makes it hard on everybody else that is trying to be a good landlord and have a legitimate business with real estate.
And it's just government will come in and save you when you're getting screwed by a contract you chose to enter into.
And yeah, and that's the other thing. It's the libertarian side of it is no one forced you to sign it. He didn't snatch anybody off the streets and go, you're going to live here. Right.
And like I said, I really think the county should be, and the cities should be held responsible to some degree, because how are you going to cite some guy between two cities 170 times and that's it? I mean, is he paying his fees, and do you not have a habitual violator problem or a code as well? I mean, I feel like there could be some local remedies here that weren't exercised or exhausted, because was a pretty thorough, like I said, this was a media investigation. It's part of a series. It's been ongoing since I think the beginning of the year. They didn't leave much to the imagination on the issue. And I just feel like the locals kind of dropped the ball. And so the state's like, no problem. We'll handle it.
And they're going to use a hatchet where a scalpel would be useful. And they're just going to make a mess of everything. And they're going to make the next guy who's thinking about getting into the rental business think twice. Because his violations are egregious. This sort of case is going to empower people who aren't necessarily wronged to use the courts to avoid paying rent or to avoid eviction. But if you walked into that single wide with the holes everywhere and said, "Yeah, this will do. I'll take it," and then a month later go, "Nah, that this won't do," and try to violate your contract, I mean, that's on you.
Ugh.
Man, I hate defending the most awful people sometimes.
Well, I mean, it's just an example of how government cannot prevent crappy societal issues. I mean, it takes a crappy person to let people live in conditions like this when you own the house.
And I love the fact that the only picture they have on file in this article is him running through the rain in a crosswalk. It's like twice in here. He's running through the rain. That's the best picture. I guess they went to the Matlow Salaji school of picture taking, because that is the worst picture you could get of him.
Nice. Nice.
Well, thank God I don't live in Arkansas. Another thing, how bad do conditions have to be for someone in Arkansas to say it's bad?
I don't know. Must have been like, yeah, this is Alabama bad up in here.
I mean, they elected Bill Clinton.
Did you vote for Clinton?
No. No.
I wasn't old enough to vote.
Nah. You want to hit this last one?
I think so. I think we have a few. I mean, we've got
Okay.
8 minutes.
City takes on private landlord-tenant relationship with ordinance enforcement. A couple with 3 children allowed a friend of their son to crash at their home during the winter months. Unbeknownst to the couple, the friend committed a crime somewhere else that they did not know about. No one in the family, no permanent resident of the home was involved, and the mother even turned the friend of her son out, or in, when she found him hiding in her basement.
So this is the dumbass of the day, dumbass of the week story. The city has a crime-free housing ordinance, and they require eviction if someone in the house where there's rentals commits a crime. But keep in mind that the city is not the landlord. Like, this isn't public housing we're talking about. This is with a landlord or a company and private individuals. Everyone is in private individuals or private entities, no government involvement, except that if the tenants who do commit a crime are not evicted, the city will take the rental license of the landlord. And in this instance, the guy has 15 properties. He doesn't want to evict the family because he is rational and reasonable and heard their story. And so the city is threatening to toss his rental license, which I think is ludicrous anyway. Why does he need a rental license? This is Granite City, by the way, I think in Illinois. This is insane. You don't need an ordinance to tell landlords when to kick out their tenants. And you don't need an ordinance requiring a rental license. And they're going to sue and they're going to win.
I hope they do.
This family, too, they weren't just renting. They're on a lease purchase plan. Like, they're going to buy the house eventually. So what are they supposed to do with the money they put in? Because someone has to break the contract. Who's going to be responsible for that? Are they going to just forfeit all the money they put towards buying this house because the city said they can't rent it anymore? It's freaking horseshit.
And, you know, even if it was committed by someone in the household, you're punishing other people for the crime they didn't commit.
Yeah, they got 3 kids
that are they're gonna have to go to different schools, find a new place to live, with crappy rental history, bad credit, and now whatever money they've paid down into this lease purchase is gone. And all because they let somebody else crash with them.
Yeah, because someone was human. And she did the right thing. It's not like she harbored a damn fugitive. She's the one that turned him in. I mean, what else was she supposed to do? If you don't know someone's committing a crime, and as soon as you learn of it, or you learn that they're wanted, and you hand them over, I would say that you acted as swiftly as you could.
It was cold. He had no place to go. And she brought him in.
So, apparently, the mayor said this has been in place for 13 years and was placed on some other municipalities near Chicago that did this. And in Granite City, where this current case is happening, a third of their 30,000 residents are renters. And they've sent 300 notices to landlords to evict tenants because of violations of the crime-free housing ordinance. So not only is it total horseshit from the perspective of too much government, but you're actually creating a burden because somebody's job is going to be checking to see when these people are guilty of a crime and generating a letter and mailing it to their landlord. And let me ask another question. Does the city have a freaking database of who's landlord and who's the renter? That's frightening.
Well, and the thing is there's no due process in this. They issue a letter, kick them out.
Yeah, you don't get to appeal. You don't get anything. And it because it's a city ordinance, it applies to city violations for things like letting your grass get too tall or littering or, like it's a violation of the code of ordinances or state law. It's not just, you're convicted of child molestation and, now you got to move. Nope.
And I guarantee this was sold to the voters as a way of preventing drug houses that landlords are purposely renting out drug dens. And again, not to come too much from the owner perspective, as I did with the last story, but he has to go out and find a new renter. How much money does he lose in rent? Well, he goes and markets this property. He displaces the family, which in this case, the guy doesn't want to do. And he's got to put this apartment or this house back on the market. Find another renter or lease purchase buyer to come in and take it over. Or else he loses his license to rent, which is absurd, like you said, that you have to go and ask the city for permission to rent. Yeah,
and it's the city, not an HOA, not a condo association, the damn city. And their involvement, it bugs me. When you go to their website for Granite City, they have a lease addendum for you to include as a landlord. The language you need to use and how thorough it needs to be for notification, and which
it's a private agreement between two parties,
right? And
both those parties are perfectly happy. That it is the contractual equivalent of the government stepping in and saying you have to get divorced. Why? Well, we decide that you shouldn't be together. It's a personal agreement between two parties, and the government is the one stepping in between. This isn't the landlord saying, "Hey, how do I get rid of these criminals?" or the tenant saying, "Hey, how do we get loose of this landlord?" They both want to stay in this agreement. They're both happy with it. And from what I can understand, it's not the neighbors complaining. No one else is complaining other than government.
And I really wish there were enough think tanks to go around for all of the injustices. There simply aren't. But the Institute for Justice is on this story, and I have no doubt that if there's any type of, if they can't settle this lawsuit, because another city that had a similar ordinance just recently settled with the ACLU, but I think this will end up being one of those things where a bunch of think tanks and a bunch of justice reform advocates are going to band together to fight this and have it struck down as unconstitutional, because, it is the definition of overreach. You're meddling. You are creating homeless people for no reason. I hate it. Dumbasses of the week. For the last 13 years, apparently.
And, at least we get to defend somebody good on the last story.
Mm-hmm. Good job on us.
We ended on a positive note. Government is the enemy.
Always.
So, Jessica, do you have any closing thoughts?
I don't really have a closing thought, per se. But I did want to share a book that I've been reading that I want to recommend, because it kind of touches on a lot of things that I advocate for on All on Georgia and that I talk about here. And I'm almost done with it, but I've read enough to offer a book review. And it's just a book by it's called From Jailer to Jailed: My Journey from Correction and Police Officer to Federal Inmate, and it gives the number, but from jailer to jail. And it's by the former commissioner of police in New York City, the guy who was there during 9/11. He was nominated by George W. to be Homeland Security Secretary after 9/11. Very accomplished man, has built prisons all over the world, and he was charged with federal crime, one of which included not paying taxes on his family nanny, and he ended up in federal prison. I'm not going to spoil what I think about his charges and everything, but it's a really interesting book, and I think it's a remarkable perspective, because it's somebody who, he worked in jails and prisons in Manhattan, in New York. He built them. He was a police officer, a beat cop, became the commissioner, worked all the way up, and then he ended up inside a jail cell, and it changed his perspective forever. And it's a quick read, an easy read, and I'm recommending it.
Small words, lots of pictures.
No pictures.
I'm out.
But big font
on
the pages. So you don't have to look over your glasses, and you might not even have to look through them. It might be one of,
Turd.
Have Connie read it to you.
Letters are hard.
Tell her to change his name to Dave.
Oh, good Lord, yeah. Yeah, she'd never let me go to prison. She'd kill me. We are coming up on legislative listening time. Out here in Paulding County, this is when legislators start coming to events. You're at the state level with this red flag law and things that are being pushed at the federal level. Especially the ones that ask the state to pass laws. These are the folks that you actually have access to. You can talk to. You can grab by the collar. You can choke them. Some of them even like it. But let them know where you stand on unconstitutional laws, whether or not the Fed asks us to take it and say, look, we turn down the federal grant money and stand by the Constitution would be my humble advice, and what I'll be telling my reps when I see them tomorrow. So, for Jessica Szilagyi, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.